The cabin was empty, but it wasn't the kind of empty that meant someone was just out for a walk on the deck. It was a strange, neat, and final, kind of empty. The bed hadn't been slept in. The white sheets were still turned down, crisp and waiting. On the small table beside it, a watch was laid carefully, its hands frozen on a moment that had already passed. On the floor, a coat and a nightshirt were folded. Not tossed aside, folded. As if someone had prepared for something. But prepared for what? The man who was supposed to be in that cabin was gone. His name was Rudolf Diesel, and he was one of the most important inventors in the world. He was a genius. He had created an engine that was about to change everything. And now, on the night of September 29th, 1913, somewhere on the dark waters of the English Channel, he had vanished. The world was left with a perfectly tidy room and a question that has never really gone away. Did Rudolf Diesel jump? Was he pushed? Or did he just slip and fall into the cold Black Sea? To understand what might have happened that night, you have to understand the man. Rudolf Diesel was not a simple person. He was brilliant, no one denied that. He was born in Paris to German parents and showed a talent for engineering from a young age. He had a vision. It was a powerful one. He saw a world choking on the smoke of coal-fired steam engines. They were inefficient, dirty, and dangerous. He also saw the rise of the gasoline engine, but he knew it was wasteful and relied on expensive, refined fuel. Diesel had a better idea, an engine that was far more efficient, an engine so powerful it didn't need a spark plug to ignite its fuel. It used pure compression. It squeezed air in a cylinder until it became so incredibly hot that when a mist of fuel was injected, it exploded on its own. It was a marvel of physics and engineering. And the best part, it could run on almost anything. Not just the cheap heavy oil left over from refining gasoline, which was called diesel fuel in his honor. In his vision, it could run on vegetable oils, peanut oil, hemp oil. He once said, the use of vegetable oils for engine fuels may seem insignificant today, but such oils may become in the course of time as important as petroleum and the coal tar products of the present time. This wasn't just about making a better machine. For Diesel, it was a social mission. He saw his engine as a tool for the little guy. A small farmer or a craftsman could power their own equipment with fuel they grew themselves. It would free them from the grip of the big coal and oil companies. It was a democratic engine, and a clean engine, an engine for a better future. But there was a problem with being a visionary. It rarely makes you a good businessman, and it often makes you powerful enemies. Diesel was a perfectionist. He nearly killed himself developing his engine, with one early prototype exploding and almost taking his head with it. When he finally got it working, he was a global sensation. But the fame didn't translate into stable wealth. He made bad investments. He was constantly struggling with patent lawsuits. He sold the rights to his engine to different companies in different countries, creating a complicated web of contracts he could barely manage. He was a man who could reimagine the world's power source, but he couldn't balance his own checkbook. This constant financial pressure took a toll. He suffered from crippling headaches. He had bouts of severe depression. His family knew he was under immense stress. He was often paranoid, convinced that corporate spies were trying to steal his secrets. The thing is, he probably wasn't wrong. His invention wasn't just a clever new gadget. It was a threat. Think about the world in 1913. It ran on coal and steam. Railroads, factories, and the mighty navies of the world all depended on it. Then there was the new power, oil controlled by titans like John D. Rockefeller and Standard Oil. They were building an empire on gasoline. Rudolf Diesel's engine threatened both of these established powers. It was a direct competitor. An engine that was more efficient and ran on cheaper fuel was a nightmare for them. And then there was the other great power of the time, the military. Europe was a powder keg, just a year away from the explosion of World War I. Germany and Britain were locked in a naval arms race. Both sides were building bigger, faster, and more powerful warships. The diesel engine was the perfect power source for a new kind of weapon, the submarine. U-boats could run on diesel engines on the surface to charge their batteries, then switch to electric power to move silently underwater. The diesel engine was quiet, efficient, and didn't produce a huge plume of smoke that would give away a ship's position. It was a military game-changer. Diesel knew this. He had licensed his engine to many companies, including the German arms manufacturer Krupp. He was a German patriot in many ways, but he was also an internationalist. He didn't believe his invention should belong to just one nation, especially for the purpose of war. He saw himself as a man of the world. And that's what brings us to that final journey. On September 29, 1913, Rudolf Diesel boarded a steamship, the SS Dresden, in Antwerp, Belgium. He was not traveling alone. He was with two business associates, George Carrels and Eugene Carrels, whose firm built diesel engines. Their destination was London. A new factory was opening there to build diesel engines. Diesel was the guest of honor, but it was more than just a ceremonial trip. He was also scheduled to meet with representatives of the British Royal Navy. The British were very interested in his engine for their submarines. He was about to hand over his technology to Germany's biggest rival. By all accounts, Diesel was in a good mood that evening. He had dinner with his associates. They talked business, they discussed the future. He seemed relaxed, even cheerful. There was no sign of the dark cloud of depression that sometimes hung over him. After dinner, he took a stroll on the deck. Around 10 p.m., he returned to his cabin, number 218. He told his friends goodnight and made a strange request. He asked to be given a wake-up call at 6:15 a.m. the next morning. Not 6, not 6:30, precisely 6:15. Then he went into his room and closed the door. That was the last time anyone saw him alive. The next morning, the call was made at 6:15 a.m. There was no answer. They knocked again. Silence. Finally, the cabin steward used his key to open the door, and he found that strange, tidy scene. The unslept in bed, the neatly folded clothes, the watch on the nightstand. But no Rudolf Diesel. A search of the ship began immediately. They looked everywhere. But the Dresden was not a massive vessel. There were not many places a man could hide. It soon became clear he was not on board. The only possible conclusion was that he had gone overboard during the night. The ship's captain noted it in his log. The news was sent ahead by wireless telegraph. When the Dresden docked in England, the headlines were already forming the Vanishing Genius. 10 days later, a Dutch boat called the Kortsen was sailing in the North Sea, near the coast of Norway. The crew spotted something in the water. It was a body. It had been in the sea for some time and was badly decomposed. The sailors pulled it from the water. They went through the man's pockets. They found an ID card, a wallet, a pocket knife, and a pill case. The name on the ID card was Rudolf Diesel. Following the maritime custom of the time for bodies in such a poor state, the sailors took the personal effects as proof and then returned the body to the sea. A few days later, Diesel's son Eugen was shown the items. He confirmed they belonged to his father. The case was officially closed. The world accepted the verdict. Rudolf Diesel, a genius plagued by debt and ill health, had taken his own life. This is the official story. It is neat and tidy, just like the folded clothes in his cabin. And there is evidence to support it. First, there were the finances. Diesel was in deep, deep trouble. He was essentially broke. His grand vision had not translated to personal wealth. He was hounded by creditors. Before he left for his trip, he gave his wife Martha a large bag filled with 200,000 German marks in cash, which was a fortune at the time. He told her it was all the money he had. He instructed her not to open the bag until the following week. It felt like a man settling his affairs, a final provision for his family before he checked out. And then there was his health. The headaches were real. The depression was real. His family was worried about his mental state. In his personal diary, which was later found, he had drawn a small cross next to the date of September 29th. For some, this was a clear indication of a planned suicide, a mark on the day he had chosen to die. His own son Eugen came to believe it was suicide. He felt his father, a proud and brilliant man, could not face the humiliation of financial ruin. Overwhelmed by debt and sickness, he simply gave up. It's a tragic story, but a plausible one. Many great minds have buckled under the weight of ordinary pressures, but things are rarely that simple. The more you look at the details, the more the suicide theory starts to fray at the edges. Let's start with his mood. Everyone who saw him that night said he was in high spirits. He was excited about the new factory in London. He was looking forward to his meeting with the British Navy, a meeting that promised a lucrative contract that could have solved many of his financial problems. Does a man on the verge of a major business success, who appears cheerful and engaged, suddenly decide to end his life just hours later? And what about that wake-up call? Why ask to be woken at a specific time if you have no intention of being there to be woken up? It seems like a bizarre, pointless detail if he was planning to jump. It's the act of a man who expects to start his day, not end his life. The neatly folded clothes are also strange. Some see it as the orderly act of a man at peace with his decision. Others see it as something else entirely. It's too theatrical, too clean. It's what someone thinks a suicide scene should look like. This leads to the second theory. It was a simple, tragic accident. The North Sea can be rough. The railings on ships of that era were not always very high. Perhaps Diesel couldn't sleep. Well, he went for a walk on the deck to get some fresh air. The ship pitched, he felt a wave of dizziness from his headaches, lost his footing, and fell into the churning water. In the dark of night, no one would have seen him. No one would have heard a cry over the sound of the engines and the waves. It's possible. It explains his disappearance without needing a complex motive. But it also doesn't feel quite right. Diesel was an experienced traveler. A fall like that seems unlikely. And again, it doesn't explain the little clues, the wake-up call, the diary entry. An accident is a random event, but the scene in the cabin felt planned, either by Diesel himself or by someone else. And that brings us to the third theory. The darkest one, the one that turns this from a personal tragedy into a political thriller. The theory that Rudolf Diesel was murdered. If you want to find a killer, you first need a motive. And in Diesel's case, there were plenty of people with a motive. He had two very powerful sets of enemies who would have been happy to see him gone. The first was the oil industry. The barons of oil, men like Rockefeller, were building a global empire based on gasoline. Their entire business model was threatened by an engine that could run on cheap crude oil or even peanut oil. The Diesel's vision of decentralized power was the exact opposite of their vision of centralized control. They had a history of ruthlessly crushing their competition. Was a single inventor, even a famous one, a match for the power of Standard Oil? To them, eliminating Diesel wouldn't have been a crime. It would have been a business decision. A simple cost-benefit analysis. The cost of one man's life versus the benefit of protecting a multi-billion-dollar monopoly. The second, and perhaps more compelling, group of enemies was the German government and its military machine. Remember, this was 1913. The drums of war were beating loudly. Germany was building up its army and navy at a frantic pace. The Kaiser and his generals were preparing for a conflict they saw as inevitable. Diesel's engine was a critical piece of military technology, especially for the U-boats that would soon terrorize the Atlantic. And what was Rudolf Diesel, a German citizen, doing? He was on his way to London to sell that very technology to the enemy. He was about to give the British Royal Navy the keys to a superior submarine engine. To the German High Command, this was not just bad business, it was treason. It was an act that could tip the balance of power in the coming war. They could not let that happen. So imagine this scenario. German agents are aware of Diesel's trip. They know who he is meeting. They know what he is planning to share. They board the SS Dresden along with him. They could be disguised as fellow passengers. They wait. Late that night, when the decks are empty, they confront him. Or maybe they don't even confront him. Maybe they just come up behind him as he stands at the railing. A quick, hard shove. A splash that no one hears. Then they slip back into his cabin. They stage the scene. They fold his clothes neatly on the floor. They place his watch on the table. They make it look like a suicide, a tidy, plausible explanation that avoids any awkward questions. It would be a clean, efficient operation. The kind of thing Secret Services do. This might sound like a spy novel, but decades later, a piece of evidence emerged that gave this theory some teeth. A German soldier and former secret agent named Franz Krefeld allegedly confessed on his deathbed. He claimed he was given orders to eliminate Diesel to prevent him from sharing his knowledge with the British. He said he was part of a team that threw Diesel overboard and staged the suicide. This confession has never been officially verified. It's a second-hand account, the kind of story that's hard to prove. But it fits the facts perfectly. It explains the motive, the method, and the strange tidiness of the scene. The story of the body adds another layer of weirdness. The fact that it was found so far north, near Norway, was strange. Ocean currents are complex, but it seemed a long way from where he likely went overboard. And the decision to return the body to the sea after only taking a few items for identification seems odd, even for the time. It conveniently removed the most important piece of evidence. A proper autopsy could have revealed if there were signs of a struggle, a blow to the head, or anything else that pointed away from suicide or an accident. With the body gone, all that was left was speculation. So what are we left with? 3 possible stories. The first is the story of a tragic genius, a man who changed the world but couldn't manage his own life. A man who, crushed by debt and depression, chose to end his suffering in the cold, anonymous waters of the English Channel. The second is the story of a simple accident, a random, unfortunate event. A man who lost his balance on a dark night and was swallowed by the sea. A footnote in the life of a great inventor. The third is the story of an assassination, a political and economic hit. A man who knew too much and was about to sell his secrets to the wrong people. A genius who was silenced because his invention was too powerful and too dangerous to be out of certain hands. We will never know for sure what happened that night. The only true witness is the sea, and it doesn't give up its secret. The waves that closed over Rudolf Diesel's head took the truth with them, but the story doesn't end there. His death, no matter the cause, had consequences. The London factory opened without him. The meetings with the British Navy happened, though we don't know what was discussed. And less than a year later, the world was at war, and the diesel engine played a central, brutal role in that war. The German U-boats, powered by his invention, became the scourge of the Atlantic. They sank thousands of Allied ships. They brought Britain, a naval power, to the brink of starvation. The very engine that Diesel hoped would empower small farmers was now being used to wage a new and terrible kind of warfare. It was a bitter irony. The pacifist-leaning inventor's creation became one of the most effective killing machines of the era. After the war, the diesel engine truly conquered the world. It powered the trucks that built our highways. It powered the trains that crossed continents. It powered the ships that carried goods across oceans. It powered the tractors that revolutionized agriculture. Diesel's vision, in a way, came true. His engine did change everything. It became the workhorse of the 20th century. But it wasn't the clean green democratic engine he had dreamed of. It ran on fossil fuels controlled by the very same corporate giants he had hoped to sidestep. The dream of running the world on peanut oil faded away. The mystery of Rudolf Diesel's death is more than just a historical whodunit. It's a story about the clash between ideals and power, between innovation and the established order. Diesel was a man who lived in the future. He saw a better way of doing things. But he lived in a world dominated by old money and old power, and on the brink of a horrifyingly modern war. He was caught in the middle of forces far bigger than himself. Whether he was a victim of his own despair or a victim of a conspiracy, his disappearance marks a turning point. It's the moment when a brilliant idealistic vision was swallowed by the dark, murky waters of reality. The genius vanished, but his engine rolled on, shaping a world that he might not have recognized, and leaving us with a question that still hangs in the air, as cold and persistent as the sea spray on a dark night.